V1, VR. V2.
Positive rate, gear up.
Gear up.
Airspeed's below the bug.
Airspeed's slow. You're slow, Dick. You're 10 knots slow.
Going down. You're going to 150 feet above 100.
Watch your altitude. Watch your altitude. Oh, shit.
The problem that you have watched this crew attempt to manage in a simulator is a good example of what can happen in an actual wind shear encounter to any of you. They were given no indication that they would be working in a wind shear environment. So to be fair, they didn't have what should be your first option, avoidance. Because most often, the decision to delay and avoid is the result of an accumulation of clues that come from meteorological reports, in-flight observations, onboard weather radar, terminal information, and PIREPs. Keep in mind that regardless of the fact that the probability of a severe wind shear encounter is admittedly low, there have been shears recorded that exceed the performance capability of all commercial jet transport airplanes. Avoid severe wind shear. To aid pilots flying at times and places where the potential for wind shear exists, a set of flight crew actions has been developed that can be used on every flight. The first step is to evaluate weather conditions for any clues that indicate the potential for wind shear exists at either the departure or destination airport. This evaluation will assist crews in making a difficult decision that is rarely clear-cut and almost always subjective. Unless the question, is it safe to continue, can be answered yes, the departure or landing must be delayed until conditions improve. If the weather evaluation yields no clues of potential wind shear, flight crews should proceed using standard operating techniques that promote the early recognition of the onset of an unexpected wind shear. There are situations, however, when there are clues that, while not clearly enough defined to dictate delay, can be interpreted as indications that conditions are right for wind shear activity. In these instances, pilots should consider the next step of the flight crew actions, the use of precautionary techniques. Although avoidance is unquestionably the best precaution, using the precautionary techniques developed through piloted simulations of actual microburst wind shear encounters can reduce the effect of an unexpected wind shear encounter. They are: on takeoff, use maximum rated takeoff thrust. Consider use of recommended flap settings. Consider use of increased rotation speed. Do not use speed reference flight directors unless equipped with wind shear recovery guidance. And use the longest suitable runway. On approach, establish a stabilized approach no later than 1,000 feet AGL. Minimize thrust reductions. Use the longest suitable runway. Consider the use of increased approach speed. And consider the use of auto flight systems and the flight director. Using these precautions should not bias a pilot's go-no-go decision in the go direction, since they each have a relatively small effect on the outcome of a wind shear encounter. The next phase in the process is the use of standard operating techniques that help crews to recognize the onset of wind shear. These procedures, which emphasize crew awareness and the use of standard call-outs, should be used on a regular basis so that they become a part of the crew's routine.
V1 VR. Airspeed hesitation.
In the event of a wind shear encounter, they will increase the likelihood of early recognition. In addition, crews must monitor vertical flight path values on a day-to-day basis so they have a clear understanding of normal conditions. On takeoff, pilots should know and use the all-engine initial climb pitch attitude and give less emphasis to strict airspeed control until terrain clearance is assured. On approach, the flight crew should monitor airspeed, attitude, altitude, vertical speed, glide path, and thrust for abnormal readings or settings that indicate vertical flight path degradation. It is particularly important to cross-check flight director commands with vertical flight path displays, which are the primary flight path references. The recognition of a wind shear encounter during the takeoff roll also may be very difficult, since the only indications may be unusual airspeed fluctuations or a slow or erratic airspeed increase. On takeoff or approach, the call-out should inform the pilot flying of any significant deviations from normal.
500 feet, vertical speed, 700 down.
Okay, we got our 30 flaps.
Runway in sight. Airspeed decreasing.
And the pilot flying should be prepared to initiate recovery immediately if there are unusual changes in excess of plus or minus 15 knots indicated airspeed, or plus or minus 500 feet per minute vertical speed, or plus or minus 5 degrees pitch attitude. And additionally, on approach, plus or minus 1 dot glide slope displacement, or an unusual throttle position for a significant period of time. Keep in mind, however, these are not exact criteria, since other factors, including rate of change, must be taken into consideration. Pilots must make the final determination when and if to move to the last step of the flight crew actions, which is using the recommended wind shear recovery technique. Simply stated, the technique involves the use of thrust, controlling the flight path with pitch, with an initial target pitch attitude of 15 degrees, and maintaining the existing airplane configuration. It is very important that pilots understand that the purpose of the technique is not to enable them to fly through wind shears, but rather to recover from situations where they have inadvertently encountered a severe shear. Let's look at the specifics of the recovery procedure applied on a wind shear encountered after liftoff.
V1 VR. Airspeed decrease.
Max power.
Thrust must be applied immediately and aggressively, avoiding overboost unless necessary to ensure airplane safety. Pitch attitude should be increased or decreased at a normal rate toward an initial target attitude of 15 degrees. If the flight path is acceptable at 15 degrees, maintain this pitch attitude. If it is unacceptable, continue to adjust pitch smoothly in small increments until an acceptable vertical flight path is attained. The upper pitch limit is stick shaker activation. If this occurs, reduce the pitch attitude until the stick shaker is no longer activated and continue to fly at intermittent stick shaker. In severe shears, stick shaker may occur at pitch attitudes below 15 degrees. Remember, it is necessary to maintain an adequate stall margin in addition to minimizing altitude loss. If a pitch attitude below 15 degrees is required to deactivate the stick shaker, pilots should again increase pitch toward 15 degrees as soon as possible. Pilots may also find that unusually high stick forces are required to control the pitch attitude. But by taking this action and accepting the low airspeed, they have a better chance of avoiding a critical altitude loss. Finally, maintain the flap and gear configuration until clear of the encounter.
80, both sides.
If a wind shear is encountered during the takeoff roll and there is not sufficient runway left to accelerate to normal takeoff speed or stop, pilots must increase thrust and initiate a normal rotation toward 15 degrees no later than 2,000 feet before the end of the usable runway, even if the airspeed is low. In this situation, the increased pitch attitude required to lift off may result in a tail strike with some airplanes. After liftoff, continue to adjust the aircraft pitch attitude to control the flight path. On approach, the recovery procedure is the same. Notice how, although turbulence increases the pilot's workload, it does not change the basic recovery technique. Also, listen to how the call-outs aid the pilot flying in taking the appropriate actions.
Airspeed decreasing, 140. 1,500 vertical speed down.
let's get out of here. Full power.
Vertical speed, 1,000 down. Level, 500 feet.
Boy, this
Level.
is really something.
500 feet, level. 500 feet, descending. 480. 500 feet and level.
This is really something.
600 feet, climbing.
The message here is simple. If you do inadvertently encounter a severe wind shear, pitch attitude and thrust may be your only remaining option. And remember, severe wind shear is extremely dangerous and difficult to recognize. Be alert for the warning signs and avoid it if at all possible.